virtual ward forum meeting. Welcome to this meeting. And those of you who are watching catch up online, greetings to you too. So my apologies go out to Kath, who can't be with us tonight. Kath's unfortunately in bed at the moment, so not feeling well. But if she's watching us now, hello, Kath. We'll try and do our best without you. Just as a reminder, this is meeting virtual meeting that's being recorded. It's being recorded and broadcast live now, and the recording will be available in 5 days' time, I think, via YouTube. We'll circulate that out. So beware that anything you say in the meeting is going to be recorded, and other people can obviously view you over a period of time to see what you've said. So that's really all it remains for me to kind of formally start the meeting. And just let me remind you that there is a chat facility. If you want to put a comment, you can do so in the chat. If you would like to speak after the presenters have spoken, there is going to be an opportunity for you to put your hand up and speak, just as Ray Beach has put his hand up. And I'm just interested, Ray, whether you've got your hand up because you want to say something or whether you're just playing with the buttons. Ray, you're on mute. You're muted, Ray. You'll have to put your mic on, Ray. Here you go. To be honest, Ray, I don't think we're not picking you up, so I think we'll have to bring. We'll start. Have another go in a bit later. But let's move on. There will be an opportunity, as I've said, for people to join in either in the chat, and I'll read up any comments that are made in the chat, or to speak live. So I'd like to press on actually with our first presenter today. Let me just run you through the agenda in case you haven't got a copy in front of you. We've got 4 key presentations. One on the public health updates to do with COVID and where we are with it. We've got an update on the Commonwealth Games Celebrating Communities Fund and any other funding available to community groups in our ward, and John Mole is going to present that. We have at last, I hope, got Miriam Aslam with us to talk about the Neighbourhood Network Scheme in Sutton Coldfield, support services for over 50s, and a new element of this, which supports younger adults with special needs support. And then we're going to move on to highways projects, and Carl Randall is with us, our highways engineer, to update us on that. So I'd like to start off, first of all, with the presentation on the public health COVID update. We've got a new presenter here, Dara Fay, who is Assistant Director Public Health. Dara's got to be off by 7:30, so we'll put you first on, Dara. I'm keen if you can update us on where we stand across the city and within our ward about the current prevalence of the virus, vaccine uptake, and any other advice you can give us about how to stay safe. So over to you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. First of all, can I check that you can hear me okay?
It's a little bit quiet. Can you up the volume?
I think if I go a bit closer, it usually
Yeah, that's
works quite
better.
well. Is that
Yep,
okay?
that's
All right, I'm
coming
just
better.
gonna, yeah, I'm just gonna do a verbal update. And so I'm just going to start with an overview for in Birmingham, and then I'll get into more detail in terms of the Sutton Vesey ward. So in terms of the rates in Birmingham, and this is data from the week between the 15th to the 21st of May in Birmingham, you have rates of around 23 cases of COVID per 100,000 in the population. And that compares to a rate of 16 per 100,000 for the previous week, which actually represents an increase of 43%. Our rate at the moment in Birmingham is equal to that of England. So again, 23 per 100,000. The difference being that the rate in England represents a drop of about -8% compared to the previous week. And just to kind of put that in context, I suppose about 3-4 months ago, we would have seen the rates in Birmingham were significantly higher than those in England, but they've gradually come down, and over the past 2-3 weeks, or maybe 3-4 weeks, they actually were lower than the rates for England, but they've gradually started to increase again. So it's something that we need to just watch carefully. It could just represent normal data variation, but equally it might actually represent a disturbing trend. So again, it's just something to be watchful of, and it could represent the lifting of the restrictions. But of course, that's not unique to Birmingham. If you go back a bit further and look at the 14-day average, so the last 14 days, the rates in Birmingham were 39 per 100,000 compared to 44 per 100,000 in England. So really, this is just kind of quite a recent shift upwards, back upwards towards the English average that we need to monitor. In terms of good news, it's encouraging to see that in terms of our rates in the over 60s, it's 5 per 100,000, which represents a reduction of 41% compared to the previous week. And that compares to 6 per 100,000 for England, which is a minus 8% reduction. And one of the reasons why that's particularly encouraging is because we know that the vast majority of people over the age of 16 are now have had both doses of the vaccine. And we feel that that's one of the main reasons why the rates are so low in that age group. In terms of what kind of situations are we finding, where are we seeing clusters and outbreaks? Predominantly, we're seeing them in the educational setting, both schools and universities, but also in the workforce. Like we had 40 situations last week, 24 were in educational setting, and 11 were in workforce. In terms of testing, the rates are 301 per 100,000, which actually represents a slight decrease from previous weeks, and that compares to 372 per 100,000 in England. So for Birmingham, I think one of our biggest challenges is to increase our testing rates. We are finding through different Operation Eagle type exercises that people are not taking up the offer to test as quickly or as or not embracing it as we'd like them to, or engaging with it. So it's just something that we need to be conscious of. Obviously, there's a lot of fatigue in terms of COVID and, adhering to all the different restrictions and doing all the right things in terms of testing and vaccination, but we have to keep battling away to try and counteract that. In terms of the two main tests that we have, the most accurate one is the PCR test. At the moment, in terms of positivity, it's 1.3% in Birmingham compared to 1.2% in England, which in itself is not concerning, except for it was a lot lower, which does indicate, which may be consistent with the idea that the prevalence might be increasing slightly, hence you would expect a bit more positivity. In terms of the lateral flow tests, it's a 0.2% positivity in Birmingham compared to 0.1% in England. And we feel overall, looking at the epidemiology, that the spread is primarily occurring through household settings and social and workplace interactions. In terms of hospital admissions, they're going down, and they range between 3 and 12 new cases a day at Birmingham Hospital Trusts over the past week or so. The one area that's probably worth focusing on a little bit is about, you probably have come across these variants of concern, particularly one called the Indian variant. There's actually 3 different types of Indian variants, but the one that's most of concern is the one that's often referred to as the April 02 variant. And this is becoming more and more common nationally and locally and regionally. In fact, if I saw charts whereby the rate of the prevalence of the Indian variant across England is now more common than the UK Kent variant. And although we're not seeing that in Birmingham or in West Midlands at the moment, we are seeing the trend going in the same direction as it is nationally. So we're seeing an increase in the number of these Indian variants, and we're seeing a decrease in the prevalence of the UK variant. So there's a significant concern that the UK or the Indian variant will take over as the predominant variant in Birmingham. And the reason why that's concerning is predominantly because it's felt to be 1.6 times more transmissible than the UK Kent variant. And also there is some evidence to indicate that the immunity derived from the vaccination program isn't as strong against the Indian variant compared to the UK Kent variant, but that is still to be proven. But it's still very common, and we have an indirect marker of the Indian variant called the S gene, which, if you're S gene negative, it indicates more than likely it's the Kent variant. If it's S gene positive, it's probably either the Indian or the South African variant. And if we look at the West Midlands compared to other regions, we are ranked 7th out of 9 regions. So it's not as prevalent as it is in other regions, but clearly, you will have heard probably in the news today, for example, that some areas, for example, in Bolton and Blackburn, are being effectively put into sort of a tier 2 restriction setting, or the guidance is that they need to take on more restrictions than they had previously, and so they're being monitored very carefully. Having said that, Birmingham itself is regarded as being on a watch list just because our rates are starting to increase, so it is something just to be mindful of going forward. Okay, so just moving on then to the more local data. So this is data from the 16th to the 22nd of May in the Sutton Vesey ward. So basically, compared to the other wards, you're ranking 18th out of 69 wards for the number of COVID cases, with first being the highest and 69th being the lowest. But your numbers are small. We're still only talking about 5 reported cases, but that equates to about 25 cases per 100,000. And if you remember, the cases in Birmingham as a whole were 23 per 100,000. I don't know how much you can read into that given that it's only data for a week, but it's just something to be mindful of. And clearly, if it was continuing to trend in that direction or trend in a worse direction, then we probably need to do something more significantly locally. And you have 17 COVID champions as of the 24th of May. So that's very encouraging. Just looking at your vaccination data, I think that is very encouraging. If we compare this ward to Birmingham as a whole, if you look at those in Birmingham who, this is in terms of the first dose of COVID vaccination, for those who are 80 years of age or over, you've got a 90% uptake in Birmingham, whereas in Sutton Vesey it's 95.5%. And if you go down all the different the core, not the first 9-10 priority groups, I think all the way down, your figures are higher than the Birmingham average, and even very surprisingly as well to see that you're at in those who are 40 years of age and over, your rates are 80.6% compared to 55.9% for Birmingham. So that's definitely encouraging. And just to kind of break it down a little bit more in terms of the actual COVID cases themselves, during this is now a 30-day period between the 23rd of April to the 22nd of May, in terms of the age group affected by COVID in your ward. 31% were in the 0 to 19 age group, 56% in the 20 to 39 age group, 6% in the 40 to 49 age group, and 6% in the 60 to 79 age group, and no cases in the 80 and above age group. And then if we break it down into ethnicity, 25% were of the Asian ethnic group, 13% of the Black ethnic group, 6% mixed other, and 38% of the white ethnic group. So that's just kind of a whistle-stop tour of your data. So happy to go into more detail if you like, but I'm also happy just to take any questions.
That's great, Gary. You've given us some really good figures there. We've not had so much precision in the information about the situation in our ward from any presenter before. So you've broken new ground here. I've got some questions coming through, but let me just ask one for myself. The first is, we've just had 1 week, I think, of the third stage of the roadmap unlock, and we've got another one prospectively coming in the end of June. Is this likely to nudge rates up, and what would be kind of an acceptable increase, and where is the kind of warning sign that things are getting back out of control again? Do you have any steer on that?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't think there's a magic formula that kind of says when you get to a certain rate, then we have to try and look at the restrictions and see what, whether or not, we can follow the roadmap that the government has set out. So I believe 21st of June is the scheduled date for the next release of restrictions, or not release of restrictions, but alleviation of restrictions, probably the right term. I think the government will be looking very carefully at the data. I think up until that point, they'll particularly be looking at the Indian variant, and how it's increasing, and also how it's behaving in terms of people's responsiveness if they do get the variant, and the degree to which it will lead to increased hospitalization, hopefully not, the degree to which it potentially will lead to increased deaths and its transmissibility. So there'll be a lot of those factors that will be considered. Also factors such as the degree to which it is travel related will be very significant in terms of travel restrictions, because certainly one of the I suppose maybe criticism is too harsh a word to say, but one of the things that people are looking at is, was the UK a little bit too early in terms of allowing people to come in from red zone countries? Because we believed a lot of people came back from India into the UK and brought the Indian variant with them before it became a red zone country that then required quarantine. So I think there'll be a lot of close scrutiny of all those factors, and then the government will either decide to actually make a decision nationally in terms of either keep it continuing with the roadmap, or maybe they might decide to introduce what they were planning to introduce with some exceptions, or what they might actually do is just say, okay, so nationally this is our position as we planned for the 21st of June, but they may select individual cities or areas within England or the UK to say, okay, for these particular places, because of their situation, they can't move to the next level until we feel comfortable with their numbers. So there may be a kind of a local response whereby they will not be allowed to continue down the roadmap as planned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I've got 3 more comments in the chat, and then I've got John Hayward to ask to to speak live. Quickly, Rebecca asks, is the Indian variant present in Birmingham, maybe more particularly even in our own ward? The second question is really for me. You mentioned COVID champions. We have 17 in the Vesey ward. We have a lot of community activity in our ward, so it's great news. Could you just sum up and maybe put in the chat what it is to be a COVID champion, and how anyone else can join the band of 17? And the final comment I note from his note in the chat, Ray Beach, who chairs our neighbourhood forum for Boldmere, as it's got his birthday today, and if we were in the Carpenter's Arms, we would now break out into a song, which unfortunately we can't do now. But maybe you could just remind Ray and all of us, how many people can he have at his birthday party later this evening?
God. I think a lot depends on to what degree you're in a bubble. God, I'll have to go back and look at the current restrictions to see what the actual numbers are. I think
know Ray knows how to behave himself. Don't worry.
So just kind of going back then in terms of the question about the Indian variant, which I think is particularly important. Yes, absolutely. We know we've had at least 46 cases of the Indian variant in Birmingham, and they're the ones that have had their full genomic sequencing. I think I was mentioning in my talk that there is an indirect marker. It's quite a good marker of the Indian variant, which is called it's an assay where you're looking out for this S gene. And if you're S gene negative, it's more than likely that it's the UK Kent variant. If it's S gene positive, it's very likely it's either the Indian or the South African variant. But we're seeing a lot more of the Indian variant than the South African variant at the moment in Birmingham. And there was some figures between I think the 6th of May and the 19th of May in Birmingham, there were 133 S gene positive cases. So I would, now we're the 25th of May, so I would expect that number to be closer to 200. With, I would say, just off the top of my head, I'd say maybe 60%, 70% of them being Indian variants. So there is a lot, and it's not. There are some clusters of the variant, but we're actually seeing it quite dispersed. It's dispersed not just within Birmingham, but actually throughout Midlands. There's a lot of cases all over them, all over the West Midlands. Some of them we have definitive links, either through community transmission or through travel, and some of them we're still exploring. So it's very much here at the moment. In terms of the COVID champions, just it's not really my area of expertise. So what I'm going to do is give you the email address of someone to ask to get more detail. But in short, there are individuals. It's a voluntary piece where you basically put yourself forward as a COVID champion, and whenever you get a chance, effectively, we'll arm you with all the relevant information and make sure you're up to date in terms of COVID and what people should and shouldn't be doing and the latest information. And the idea is then that when you're linking with your colleagues or your friends and families, that you're constantly reinforcing the message, which I think has proven to be quite successful to date. We're hoping to get to 1,500. I think in total we have 810 at the moment in Birmingham. So it's great to see that there's keen interest in that area. And I'll put the link of the person to email if you want more detail when I finish here.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. I know there will be residents interested in this. The community champions, COVID champions, really helpful in myth busting. We all know myths going around, and sometimes people don't trust what people like me, politicians, say, or even experts like Dara. But on the street, people you know, people you trust, spread the truth and put out the false and stamp on the false stories and myths and rumors that are floating around. That would be really helpful.
It's crucially important, I think, particularly given that there's a lot of, in terms of myths, particularly now that people are vaccinated, there's a lot of people who feel because I'm vaccinated, I can't transmit the virus or I can't actually get the virus, and neither of which are true. Certainly, if you are vaccinated, you're much less likely to be severely affected by it, but you can still get it, and you can certainly still transmit it.
Great. So anyone who can join the Mythbusters, follow the email link. But can we, Leslie, go over to John Hayward, who's got his hand up and would like to make a point?
I was wondering if you could explain where we are about transmission. I understand that the evidence is showing more and more that this COVID is transmitted by droplets. So does this mean that we can now ease up somewhat on washing our hands and washing surfaces? And, I suppose I'm wondering, how safe would it be to hand out leaflets if you were doing a street stall?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's still potential, if particularly if you weren't vaccinated and you were symptomatic, or I mean, a third of people are not symptomatic. So if you had an active infection, that you could then have a droplet which could fall on your leaflet, and then the individual who could take it could actually then they could then contaminate it if they went on their hands and then they put their hands to their mouth. In theory, they could get it off you, but the risk would be pretty low. I think using gloves and a lot of hand sanitization on a regular basis would be a good practice. Even, I mean, I know it's not very practical, but ideally doing a hand sanitization before you hand out every leaflet, but that's probably not practical. But but at the same time, I think if you sanitize your hands properly, and the leaflets, maybe if they come in sort of cellophane wrapping, so you sanitize your hands, then you open up the leaflets, and then there's nobody around to add additional droplets onto the leaflets, then you should be handing the person an uncontaminated leaflet. So I think there's a way of doing it without potentially cross-contaminating or transmitting it.
That's really helpful advice to those of us who do like to stand on the high street and hand out leaflets. Manish, who's on the call, will remember that we had a slot, he and I, on Boldmere High Street a couple of weeks ago, where we had to point to a little tray and tell people, take a leaflet if you want to, but we weren't empowered to touch them. Hopefully one day we will be able to dish them out. I've got a note in the chat from Rebecca Clark. Beyond 21st of June, if all things go well, would you still recommend wearing masks and continuing social distancing as much as possible?
I would. I think you know, we're this pandemic is still very much active. Thankfully, in the UK, combined with the you know, a very good vaccination program, and for the most part decreasing rates, although we're starting to see spikes in relation to the Indian variant, but certainly, you know, 2 to 3 weeks ago all the data was pointing in the right direction. But but across the globe, I mean, there's still countries with very high incident rates and very high death rates, and I think in India, for example, I think there's something like 25% of people who are tested are positive, and something like 45% in Nepal, I think. So you know, the problem is that just like, you know, we believe it came from China in the first place, all of that could keep coming back at us. Now, the difference, of course, this time is, you know, we have a lot more restrictions in place, a lot more screening in place, where people are well, not the majority of people, but a huge amount of people are vaccinated. So our defense mechanism is a lot stronger. But, you know, the thing about it is you don't want to have a variant, for example, which is able to get round our immunity and affect us again, just like we had previously. I think that's very unlikely, but you could get a variant that is still fairly virulent or fairly impactful in terms of its impact on our health. So I think we, at least until 2022, I think we need to try and be as vigilant, or almost as vigilant as we were, and do all the protective measures that we did previously within reason, understanding that there's huge mental health, welfare, and economic aspects to this pandemic to consider. But yeah, we're definitely not out of the woods with this pandemic yet.
Okay, thanks, Dara. That's a useful salutary warning in case we all kind of go over the top and think it's all over. And clearly it's not. I know you've got to leave at 7:30, so you've got 3 minutes to put that little note in the chat. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Sure.
Particularly like to thank you for being able to talk to us in simple, plain English. You've got the same qualities there as our director, Justin Varney, and I think Birmingham's Public Health Department has stood out as really top-class communicators. You've been put under real pressure with this over the last year, and I've been incredibly impressed, and the committee I chair, I see this, at the ability of our department to really connect with the citizens of their cities. So you've done a great job. I'd like to thank you on behalf of all the Vesey residents for the work you're doing.
It's very kind. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you've got another meeting to go to.
It's very kind. Thank you very much.
Great
Nice
stuff.
meeting you.
Thanks very much for that. And we'll then move on to the next item on the agenda. For those who've joined us, we're on agenda item 4 now, which is the update on the Commonwealth Games Celebrating Communities Fund. So I'm going to ask John Mole, who works for our Neighbourhood Development and Support Unit in the City Council, to do a brief update on where we stand with this Commonwealth Games Celebrating Communities Fund and any other funds that he think will be of relevance to residents in our ward. Quite a number of residents groups have already met with John to talk about their funding interests, but John, we've got a wider audience here, and obviously we broadcast this across the ward when the YouTube goes out, so it would be great to get a little update on that pot of money and any other resources you think might be useful for residents to engage in community activities in and around the Commonwealth Games. So a year and 2 months to go. Over to John.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just confirm that you can actually see the shared screen?
Well, we can see you at the moment.
Well, that's of no use at all then, because I thought I was actually shared a magnificent PowerPoint presentation. I'll have to have another go at it.
I can't see it yet. But as you know, in our dress rehearsal before this meeting, I can't share screens either. So
I'm
I've got
a
no
little bit
grounds
concerned
to,
about that. All right, let's try
yeah.
again. How about that?
It looks promising. Yay! There we go.
Hurrah.
Well done.
Right. I don't know what went wrong the first time. It's probably because I've got my glasses on. I never wear glasses. I think that's part of the main problem. Okay, guys. Right. As you might have heard, we've got the Commonwealth Games coming our way. I'm trying to make this as exciting as possible, but I'm giving out presentations most nights at the moment, so forgive me if it sounds a little bit staid. But celebrating Commonwealth Games funding. So what have we got? Let's start with the important bits. Hang on, that's not working. I'm not happy at all. Bear with me a moment.
Slideshow.
I'm going to go again. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's better.
Right, that's much better. Everyone should hopefully see that. So, hello, good evening all. Let's start with the important bit. How much has the ward got? Now, we have not got a lot of money. The money has been distributed across all 69 wards across the city, so it's not a huge sum. The ward, however, has got the highest total, the joint highest total of 22,200. It sounds a lot, believe me, it is not. So what is the Celebrating Community Small Grants Fund about? This is all about trying to get people to become more excited and to become more related to the Commonwealth Games. It is a big coup for the city that we've got it. So what we're trying to do now is drum up support. We're trying to get people interested and trying to get them excited and trying to get everybody involved with the Commonwealth Games, which should be a good thing for Birmingham. There are three, I can never get this word out, and this is sober. There are 3 fund themes. I challenge you all to try that 3 times in a row. There's Get Active, Ready, Steady, Fun, and Celebrating Culture. Now, there are 2 rounds of funding. Round 1 for applications is actually due by the 1st of June of this year, with round 2 applications beginning 30th of November. I think we're going to bring that forward. Now, what I am going to stress here is do not panic on timelines. I do not want to see a rush bid that goes in on the 1st of June, only for it to be refused because it hasn't hit some of the key criteria that we're looking for. So think long and hard if we're going to put one in before the 1st of June. The 3 themes. So we've got the obvious one. This is again about the Commonwealth Games and generating interest. So Get Active. It goes without saying, the Commonwealth Games is about sport and activity. So we're encouraging communities to get out and get active by participating in sports and recreational activities. Now that can be anything from doing a 2,000 walk to doing some mini sports games. And a lot of schools across the city right now are talking about setting up some mini Commonwealth Games, which is fabulous. And it's also about our active streets and parks. It's about developing projects that enable communities to be active and connected in their streets. Second element, again, pretty sensible, pretty obvious. Ready, Steady, Fun. We want to see community projects which help ensure your local area is games ready. Hosting community celebrations to develop active citizens and reduce loneliness and social isolation. Can't believe I put so many tongue-twisting words in. Okay, right, so what are we looking at? There are particular elements that you should be thinking about. So games ready. Deliver community volunteer projects to get local areas games ready. For example, spring clean of streets. We might want to put some bunting up. We might want to just make certain that the area, especially in Sutton Vesey, because obviously we're expecting quite a big footfall, just looks spick and clean and ready for action. We're also looking about celebrating communities and having fun. So it's working with diverse communities to ensure that we deliver a range of celebratory events. I'm changing this tomorrow, or I'm going to have a drink, one or the other, such as street parties and picnics that help to connect our citizens and foster civic pride. I've got to stress this. Remember, keep the link to the games. I've seen a lot of really good projects coming in across the city at the moment, but they have absolutely no kind of connection whatsoever to the Commonwealth Games. I've seen stuff from domestic abuse. I've seen stuff from school activities that doesn't even have a focus on the Commonwealth Games. So please, 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 this is Commonwealth Games funding. If you're putting a bid in, make certain we remember it's Commonwealth Games. And the third one, celebrating culture. We would love to see community-led cultural events and initiatives develop and encourage intergenerational activities. Birmingham does have a place in the Commonwealth, so it's about bringing that to the fore. It's about stories of Birmingham and its residents, unheard stories, engagement between communities of place and identity. However, I'm going to keep saying this all night. Remember, keep the link to the games. It's Commonwealth Games funding. Hopefully our message is getting across. Right, so core criteria. Proposals should be able to explain links to the Commonwealth Games. how it supports your local ward plan, and we've got one of those, councillor, and it is excellent, and it will fit any area of the Commonwealth Games priorities at the moment. How it adds value. We're not talking about replacing a lost service. Like all external funding or internal funding from the city, it's not about saying, well, we've just run out of money, we want some more. We're not going to give you any money for that. So think about how you can add value to the Commonwealth Games, and is it something new and different? And how it helps citizens get the maximum benefit from the Commonwealth Games. Funding can be used to cover most types of community activity, and that includes core costs, which can be quite rare, revenue costs, new and existing projects, provided there is an element to the Commonwealth Games, one-off initiatives. Right. You can access grant application support via the NDSU at birmingham.gov.uk. That's me, John Mole at Birmingham. You can also submit an application if you want to directly online. I wouldn't recommend that. We seem to have had a few gremlins along the way, and the feedback I'm getting right now from groups I've been working with is they would rather do it on a Word application form. Councillor Pocock's got some and I've got some as well. So if anybody wants a Word application, please contact either of us. Write in your application. There are 3 different application forms because we've got 3 different levels of funding. There's up to £1,000. We're not going to be looking for any great magnificent pieces of work up to £1,000. It's about encouraging small community groups to think about what they can do. £1,000 to £5,000. Yes, we're going to start to look at projects there. We want to make certain we've got value for money. And 5,000 plus. Now, if it's a 5,000 plus bid, it's got to be in depth. We need to see that we've got exact costings, and we've seen something that's going to give us some sort of succession. How is this going to be not just a one-off, but how it can be stayed in the ward forever? And I'm going to keep stressing it. Please, please, please align your bid to the games. There's far too many good bids coming in that have got nothing to do with Commonwealth Games at the moment. Right, what are the questions like? It's pretty simplistic. So we need to know what sort of group you are, which theme you're applying to, your project and activity ideas. Please expand on that. The total cost and what you'll be spending the grant on, and how does your activity celebrate the Commonwealth Games? I'm stressing that point. I'm going to keep stressing it all night till you're all bored silly with it. So £1,000 plus applications. We need to look at how your project activity aligns with your ward priorities and funding criteria. We have got the ward plan on Birmingham City Council's website. And again, I know Councillor Pocock has got a copy probably at his side at all times. We need to look about how you're going to deliver your project, how you'll know you've been successful. Do you have any plans for the continuation of the project? Any external match funding? Now that would be useful. I haven't seen many projects yet coming in where they're saying there is match funding. If we're thinking about match funding, guys, match funding doesn't necessarily have to be financial. It could be volunteer support. Now, whenever I write an external bid outside of Birmingham City Council, I always have match funding because you always have a group of volunteers who are actually classed as external match funding. So think about that. Normally, if you've got a volunteer and they're working for an hour, that's £10 of match funding that you could throw straight into your bid. If we've got any capital projects, we need to see an exact quote. 3 quotes, please, if possible, over 5,000. If you're applying for larger sums, it is important to think about the legacies, I've stressed. Legacy refers to what will remain after your project finishes. Will it be a new walking group form that will be with us forever? Could it be some new piece of community art? Or have we transformed a piece of green open space and turned it into an area for physical activity and people meeting up? And sustainability for larger sums, a good application will deal how this whole activity will continue after the project. We really do want to see that if at all possible. Now, in all good funding bids, make certain you read the guidance. It's probably a long time for all of us since we were at the school classroom going for an exam, but the first thing you're taught is read the question, turn over the leaf, read the question, and then think about the answer. That is always the best way when you're thinking about writing an application for funding. Make sure you're answering the questions that are being asked. Look at there's no tricks here. It's all very, very simple. So just have a look at the questions, make sure we answer them. Be clear both in your presentation and answers. Make it as easy as possible for the person reading it. Treat us like imbeciles. That's what I always say when you're writing an application for external funding. If you make it nice and easy, then the assessor's going to look at it and go, yeah, I get where they're coming from. I know what they're trying to do there. Now then, there are extra resources. There's not just myself out there. We have got Locality, who has been commissioned from Birmingham City Council to assist with this process. So I've put up on the PowerPoint screen and we'll send them out to everybody. We've got Locality and we've got Birmingham Community Matters. two organisations that have got fantastic background in working with community groups in the third sector. So we've incorporated them now into the processes. Birmingham Community Matters are even doing funding workshops and application workshops. So it's worth contacting Birmingham Community Matters and getting onto one of those if you've got an idea of a bid, but you haven't quite tweaked it to how you want it to be. And that's a very quick whistle stop, Councillor. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer anything that's coming my way.
You're on mute, Councillor Pocock.
Thank you. I've noticed there is a member attending today who is Ray Goodwin. Ray is here, I think, to help community groups. Did you want to say an intro, Ray, just to introduce yourself to our Vesey members?
Yes. Hello, I'm Ray Goodwin from Spitfire Services. John Moldens kindly asked me to get involved and help support this process. So for my benefit and everyone else's, I'm going to be helping facilitate some of the ward meetings when we're making the decisions around what good projects will happen and what's going to happen in Sutton Vesey. And just to kind of pick up on what John has said, I think one of the tricks in all this, and I've been saying this to kind of the meetings I've been at with John, is actually what is going to be really, really good is if when the bids are all coming together, there's a degree of connectivity in all this. So actually, they're not standalone applications. There are applications that kind of are joined together in some way, but also bring the best of what Sutton Vesey is out into the Commonwealth, which I think, listening to some of the meetings I've been at, some of the dialogue in these meetings have been really, really good. And I'm sure John would agree with this. Probably, I guess, Sutton Vesey are ahead of everybody else at the moment in kind of their thinking and doing around the Commonwealth. So well done, everyone.
Thanks for that, Ray. We always like to think we lead the way here. That's not an arrogant comment. We do like to play our part, though. Great stuff. I haven't seen any comments in the chat. So is there anybody who wants to step in now and ask a question? I know there's a lot of community groups are beavering away on drafts for this application, but if anybody wants to ask a question, you've got a chance. Or that will be it. I don't see any more questions. So we'll move on. Can I just remind members, as a piece of housekeeping, please switch your microphones off. Screens, it's okay, but I think there might be a couple of mics on. Thank you for that. Somebody's done the job of switching them off. So that's great. We can hear each other better now. So I'll thank you for your time, John. It looks like you've escaped without an ear bending, so that's a good way to finish your slot. And we'll move straight on to the next presenter, who is Miriam Aslam. Miriam is with us for the third time of asking. We tried once, I think the technology fell over and various other issues, but we're delighted to welcome you, Miriam. Miriam is the coordinator, the organizer for the Neighbourhood Network Scheme, and Miriam is going to talk about what this scheme is offering to the residents of Sutton Coldfield, in particular the Vesey ward. And I think you've got some exciting new enhancements to the work that you're doing that's not just about supporting older residents, but also supporting younger residents with additional needs too. So Miriam, do you want to take us through the work you do, and then we'll have a chance for questions?
Yeah, no problem. Can everybody hear me okay? So thank you so much for having me, Councillor. I'm glad I finally managed to make it. We've had a couple of challenges getting here. So so my name's Miriam Aslam. I'm the Neighbourhood Network Scheme Manager for Sutton Coldfield, so the lead for the Sutton Coldfield area. For those of you that might not necessarily know what the Neighbourhood Network Scheme is, it's a Birmingham City Council funded programme, which is all about kind of aligning public sector services, so things like adult social care, with voluntary sector and local charitable provision in the area as well. So we provide small grant funding. So similar, I'm not going to go over grants again because John's kind of already gone over it, and the Sutton Coldfield small grant NNS small grants is a very similar process, but basically anything from a small constituted group to a voluntary sector organisation or a CIC or a local charity can apply for small grant funding. and that can be anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000. I'm going to try and share my screen. I don't know whether I'm actually able to. I don't think I
Good
can
luck.
actually. It's okay, because I wanted to just run through what investment we made in the last financial year. Now now we've come to the end of the last financial year, so 2020 to 2021. I can kind of summarise where the small grants investment in Sutton Coldfield went. So the current pot we have is just over 80,000, and this year it will be slightly smaller. And this list that I'll go through with you isn't exhaustive, so it doesn't include things like staffing costs or additional project costs, but I tried to summarise some of the more tangible things that the small grant investment went into. So I'll just run through this list, and then I'll kind of give you an idea of what we'll be doing this new financial year. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to let you know what we've done in the last year. So in terms of investment, so that's 80,000, just over 80,000 pounds worth of small grants investment, and I'll just run through what sort of tangible things it went through. So in terms of food, it funded 1,488 meals, 45 Christmas dinners, 302 food parcels, and the setup of one food pantry that will hopefully feed up to 2,600 households or people across the coming year. 75 Christmas gifts for older adults in Sutton Coldfield, £3,500 worth of PPE for coming out of lockdown. In regards to digital inclusion, some of this was jointly funded by NNS Erdington. We've got 30 tablets, 18 laptops and 15 computer monitors now available to the public. In terms of support worker hours, we funded 3,000, not 3,000, sorry, that would be amazing, 352 parish nurse hours, 180 expert benefit advisor hours, 272 community development hours to restart local activities for older adults, and 5 trained benefits volunteer advisors. And then we've got some health related support that we've provided, funded as well. 20 community assets becoming more accessible through the premises access pledge being led by SCDAG, as well as Sutton Coldfield Disability Action Group. I'll try not to use acronyms. And then we've also got the development of a Know Before You Go guide, so a sort of day out disability user guide for the local area in Sutton as well. And then we've got 12 support sessions for people who are recovering from ileostomy surgery, 12 chair yoga sessions, 48 mental health workshops that are currently being delivered and can be accessed as well. And I will share an email, so if anybody's interested in any of the things that I've talked about and taking part in them, they can get in touch. The 48 mental health workshops are being delivered in community languages such as Urdu, Punjabi and Hindi, as well as English. Then we've got 2 wheelchairs for Sutton Coldfield's vaccination hub at the town hall, 26 online support sessions for people managing recovering from chronic fatigue, and then 20 telling Sutton stories creative workshops being led by Folio. So a real breadth and mixture of different things that we funded, and further on top of that £80,000 worth of investment, there's been a further £53,000 worth of investment in Sutton Coldfield that's all been kind of emergency food and sort of COVID support related. So real mixture and breadth of investment in the area. It's all been delivered by voluntary sector and local organisations, so it's all been spent locally by local organisations. So I'd hope, and I think it's a pretty good value for money in terms of what we managed to get for that. So that just kind of gives you a feel of the things that we're supporting on. I will share our contact details, so if there's anything that I've mentioned that you're like, oh, I wouldn't mind getting in on the yoga session, chair yoga sessions or anything like that, then please do get in touch with us. In terms of what the next financial year that we're now in is looking like, so the councillor mentioned that we currently work with older adults, so at 50 plus. We are now part of a pilot, so it's being done by Sutton Coldfield Neighbourhood Network Scheme as well as in Hodge Hill. And this is supporting younger adults, so 18 plus, with additional needs. So those additional needs include sensory loss, so whether that be hearing or visual impairment or hearing loss. It also includes learning difficulties. It also does include autism, but not other neurodiverse conditions. We've got mental health issues, physical disabilities as well. And I feel like I've forgotten one. No, I think that's all of them. So it's adults, sort of young, how I'm referring to them is younger adults with additional needs. So we'll be looking to work with our existing community assets and community groups and helping them understand how they could make their services more accessible to a wider group of people and make their existing services more inclusive. And we'll also be working with local voluntary sector organisations, for example, the likes that you might have heard of Square Peg, who are based in Boldmere, who support children and young people with learning difficulties and autism. And it will be around helping them access funding and kind of networking with one another as well to increase their capacity and kind of the resources that they've got. So that's kind of one area that we're looking at. So over the next coming months, we'll be funding and hosting a number of workshops which community groups will be able to access to understand how they can make their services more accessible, for example, for people with autism or hearing loss. So it'll be raising awareness of different conditions that residents might have within Sutton and how we can support them in our community work. And then we've also got coming up our digital inclusion programme. So this will be there'll be tablets and data that will be free of charge for residents to access. They can borrow the devices if they were borrowing a book in the library, where they can go away and use it. So if somebody's got digital skills, but they might not necessarily have a device to access, they can do that. There'll also be digital skills workshops as well for those that might want to expand their learning and get online. So that we've got that coming up as well. And then we're also looking at kind of community confidence as we roadmap out of the restrictions and lockdown, kind of how can we support our older adults and those more vulnerable in the community to feel more confident to rejoin their community, rejoin community activities and get out of the house and sort of start socializing again. How can we make it safe and how can we give them the confidence to do that? So quite a lot of different things going on at the moment. And obviously we've got our grants fund that will be supporting the local voluntary sector this year as well. So it will be spread against supporting older adults as well as younger adults with additional needs. So I think that's, again, I've kind of given a bit of a whistle stop tour. I feel like I've been talking for ages as well. So just let me know if anybody has any questions, really, if there's anything you want to know a bit more about. I feel like I've reeled off quite a lot of information.
You've done a great job, Miriam, and thanks very much for making the opportunity this time to get along. It's been great to get over the technology problems and have you with us.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the attendance here, and I see we've got Tony Willis with us. Tony is a beneficiary of the project you mentioned, which I'm hoping, Tony, you could explain a bit about this. It's great that the City Council's neighbourhood scheme has supported the Disability Access Guide, but for those of us who don't know a lot about it, Tony, do you want to step in and say what it is this funding is supporting? If you can join us, that would be brilliant.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Tony is, by the way, the chair of the Bannersgate Neighbourhood Forum, the longest standing and most active neighbourhood forum in the city. I've said it for you.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No? Yes?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, we had a grant around about 10,000 from Wards for All, and we bought some tablets with it, and we were running courses in age concern opposite Costa. And if the pandemic had started 3 months later, we'd have had them all doing what we're doing now, because we were coming to the end of the course. and it really annoys me because I've been trying over the phone to get people to. It's very difficult telling people what to do on a tablet over the phone. Believe me,
Really is, yeah.
First of all, is there a description for any of those icons? It looks like a cog. What's a cog? Well, you know, it looks like a and what does Chrome look like? Well, Chrome looks like well, heck, look, it's Chrome. It looks, you know, it's Chrome. Very difficult. Very difficult. So
I suppose you don't think about describing it until you really need to somebody
That's
who's
right.
never used it before.
Yeah. But anyway, I've devised a method now that might be useful, where I can project onto the screen what my tablet is doing. Although you can't see my hands on it, but you know, that helps, because then I can describe it more fully as to the button I want them to press, not button, the icon. But I'm looking forward to getting out of this pandemic and finishing off our course, because
Great.
we have the money for it, which is
Yeah.
even more annoying.
And our new digital inclusion officer will be reaching out to you as well, because I know you've done a lot of work in this area, so it'd be good to have your support. But yeah, we've kind of hopefully now we're road mapping out. So some of the things that I mentioned that were funded last year will be being delivered this year, because obviously, although we funded it in the last financial year, some of those organisations haven't been able to deliver because of the lockdown restrictions and their community venues being closed, etc. So yeah, it'd be good to have you back out in the community doing what you do best, Tony.
By the way, Miriam, your report is in the latest edition of Gatepost on pages 26 and 27. And it's a 40-page, totally free newsletter. And if you want it, send an email with the subject line reading email Gatepost. That's all, to our Gatepost address, our address, which is bgatepost@gmail.com. So that's the letter B in front of the word Gatepost, bgatepost@gmail.com, and you'll get this every month, 40 pages, lots of interesting stuff, puzzles and jokes, and actually a bit of education and instruction as well.
Yeah, I once wrote a poem for it, but I haven't done recently.
You wrote a poem about 4 times for it.
Yeah, I've got my fingers burnt with that last one. I was slagging off councillors. That's including myself. Tony, you're on SCADAG, the disability group in Sutton, and they've also got some funding for this disability access guide.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that project?
One of the problems, if someone invites me to a meeting, I have to go the day before to make sure that I have access to it. And when I say I have access, I don't just mean a step here and there. I mean somewhere I can park where I can take my wheelchair out from the side and get into the building, and know that there's lifts where there should be lifts, and so on and so forth. We want that sort of thing for Sutton Coldfield. We also want we're giving advice to shopkeepers, to organisations, anyone with a building that is not at the moment accessible. So we want to work on that as well. 2 of us did independently. We did an access. Sorry, not an access. I'm having John's trouble now. I'm thinking of the right word.
Audit.
It's not that I can't say it. I don't know what it is. It's.
I think you did an audit.
Yeah, that's the word. It began with A. I knew it began with A. We did an audit of Boldmere, totally independently, and we came up with exactly the same figure. 50% of Birmingham of Boldmere is inaccessible to someone in a wheelchair. Now, that's not 5%. That's half. Half of them we couldn't get into, and most of them, you needed something about 2 inches high and shaped like that, so our bogie wheels can get onto it and ride up it. That's all it took. There's there's accidentally, I think, there's a greengrocers in Boldmere opposite the deli, and they've got a stiffish rubber black mat, and it's ideal. It's a bit of a rough entrance, but because of that mat, I can get in my wheelchair, no trouble at all. Beautiful.
Brilliant.
So
Well,
anyway, that's what we're trying to do, get it more accessible in a nutshell.
it's a great piece of work. I know if Kath was here, she'd be celebrating because she's very keen on physical access
Yeah.
to make the ward accessible. So it's a great step forward. So well done for that. We'll look forward to getting that 50% down to at least 5%. We can maybe cope with that. I haven't seen any more comments in the chat. Does anybody else want to raise a hand or put a comment in? If not, we'll move on to the next item. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, local highways and road safety projects. Over the 4 years of this, since this last cycle of the City Council, we've had something like £80,000 available, and 20,000 a year for improvements to local highways and parking and problems in the area. Carl Randall looks after this. So Carl, you're going to update us on where we've got to with the current projects and what we've got in mind next.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and good evening all. Yes, I've been working with Councillor Pocock and Councillor Scott on this year's priorities. We've had one initial meeting, just focusing first of all on what we achieved last year. We advertised a traffic regulation order because it was acknowledged there was a few locations in Sutton that needed just some bits and pieces of yellow lines, nothing major. Boldmere Road by Highbridge Road opposite Sportology. There was an ever-growing number of complaints that people were parking legally there, legally loosely defined, near to the junction and opposite Antrobus Junction, half on the footway sometimes. So we proposed some yellow lines to go there for a short stretch. Also Fir Tree Grove outside the garages. It's a public highway, that section, and people are parking in front of the garages and blocking them for whoever owns or leases or stores a vehicle in there. So a short section of lines, again, just to protect people's right of access. And also a little bit on Station Road, by the train station, by the railway bridge, on the Vesey side of the bridge, obviously, rather than the other side, which goes into another ward. We carried out consultation informally first, just to tease out what people think. Have we got it right? Do we need a bit more, a bit less? We then moved to adverts in the street, on street, in the press, and a formal consultation with people. Pleased to say that we haven't received any objections at all to those 3 small schemes. So an order has been raised now with our contractors, and we hope those lines will be going down in the next few weeks or so, which will show an improvement in people's parking and access, etc. We meet with the councillors and we hear of all types of initiatives, requests, lots of different things going on, and then we try and align the budgets to meet those requests in line with the activities. And one of the successful activities that's been going on recently, and more recently after COVID, is the community speed watch initiatives that have been taking place on various roads in the Vesey ward. That's where a PCSO, PC if available, myself sometimes, and residents attend a community speed watch. So somebody points the gun at the oncoming motorists. Hopefully they're going within the prescribed limit. If they're exceeding it to the amount that's agreed by the PCSO, for instance, above 36 in a 30 maybe, then they'll be sent warning letters, which could lead to a fine if it's a repeat or high speed, or maybe they're seen on a mobile phone or no seatbelt. So to try and assist with this, we had requests for 30-mile-an-hour roundels in some roads, for slow markings in other roads, and for speed check signs. And these speed check signs complement the Community Speed Watch initiatives. So on Highbridge Road, where there's regular speed watch, we have installed speed check signs in both directions of where the checks take place. And we've also put some slow markings in both directions as well, just to remind people, especially coming down the hill from Birmingham Road, you can inadvertently get your speed up. On Sutton Oak Road, we've also provided some slow markings. It's near the Chester Road North junction. On Baker's Lane, we reduced that from 40 to 30 a few years ago. We've just added 30-mile-an-hour roundels at both ends of the road, and we've also put police speed check signs up. That's also another regular location where the Community Speed Watch takes place. On Jockey Road, on the approach to Melrose, Maxted, the roundabout, we've put a slow mark there on the road, just to remind people in advance to slow down. We do know people pull out of the junctions, and sometimes they perhaps going a little bit too fast on the approach to the roundabout. So it's just an additional warning and a reminder to slow down. Moving on to access issues, as Councillor Pocock mentioned, Councillor Scott leads on improving access and accessibility in the Vesey ward, and we've consulted with the councillors and with residents and Tony Willis in the past and present as well. And what we're looking to do is to drop the curbs at the end of roads for ease of access, easier access for wheelchairs, mobility scooters, pushchairs, prams, just people in general being able to cross a road at an easier level. A normal standard curb is 5-inch curb face, 125 millimetres. The dropped curb is a 6mm face, so it's considerably less. It's just enough to hopefully let the water flow away, but it's a great improvement and aid for people trying to cross. There are 3 locations where we're doing the drop curbs on both sides of a road. In last year's ward minor measures, they haven't been done yet. They're marked up ready. They're Westwood Road at Raynardin Drive, they're Bannersgate Road at by Murray Court, and Boldmere Road at Sunnybank Road, and at Boldmere Drive, two lots there. And we had a meeting last week on Friday, and we talked about a number of other locations that have come forward. We've always got far more locations than we've got funding for, but we believe in chipping away, finding the funding where we can, and trying to get it from whatever pot of money we can get it, whether it's safer routes to school, whether it's the ward minor measures, whether it's development contribution from something being built. So hopefully, and to aid the target just talked about, we will continue to identify locations and work with everybody to get the curbs lowered. So that's a sort of very quick whistle-stop tour of what we've done, what we're about to do, and some of the things we're looking at for this financial year. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I'll look for questions in the chat. Thanks very much for that presentation, Carl. Just like to highlight 2 points. Station Road, the little bit of yellow line that goes in front of the access way to the flats. This has come about because some residents came along to one of our ward forum meetings and made a fuss about it, and it's taken about a year or 2 to get it done. But it proves that if you come to these meetings, raise an issue, you don't always get ignored. Eventually, with a decent chance that things will get done. So that's a really positive piece of news. Another one, which you didn't, I think, mention, Carl, is the Safer Routes to School project around the New Oscott Primary School, which I think we've now got some yellow lines, some 30-mile limits coming on that. Did you want to
absolutely.
How that came about?
Yes. Last financial year, we was awarded 5 Safer Routes to School schemes. These are where a school completes the latest updated school travel plan. they sign up to the government's initiative Mode Shift Stars that promotes safety around schools, modal shift change. How do we go from going in a car to walking, cycling, biking, scootering, park and stride? Once a school has signed up to those, they've done their bit. We do our bit then, and we get the funding, and we try and align highway measures in with what the school have identified as being needed or lacking on the current infrastructure. On this example, New Oscott Primary identified the need for a crossing on Monmouth Drive, down by sort of Avery Road, down that end towards Chester Road North by the park, and the justification wasn't there for a signalised pedestrian crossing. They cost 60, 70, 80,000 pounds depending, and there needs to be an amount of people already trying to cross to meet the criteria. The reason being, we have so many of these requests across the city, we need to target the limited funding at the sites of the highest priority. So we thought, well, okay, we could maybe put a zebra crossing in, awful lot cheaper, maybe £30,000. However, because the speed limit was 40 mile an hour, the Department for Transport guidance is we need to get the speeds around 36, 35 mile an hour because, stopping distances, etc. So for a zebra, we really need the speeds to be mid-30s rather than the current limit at 40, and people may be doing a little bit more than that. So the first stage of what we've done is carried out a consultation, and people have agreed with us, and we've now reduced the speed limit of that section of Monmouth Drive from 40 to 30 mile an hour. We're letting that bed in and people get used to it and see the signs that the speed limit's changed. And at a point in the near future, we will undertake more speed surveys, and we'll see if we have been able to achieve the desired speed, and if we have, we can then do a follow-up bid to either Safer Routes to School or other places for the funding for a zebra crossing. So yes, thanks for reminding me of that one, Councillor.
Thanks, and I know we're hoping to turn to the Town Council for that funding, and also another crossing on Monmouth Drive, and we'll bring in Councillor Manish Puri, who's on the call, when we get to the next agenda item. Manish is going to do a little update on where we stand with that. But I've seen a hand from Rosemary Quickenden. So Rosemary, do you want to chip in with a question? You need to turn the microphone on.
My question is about Monmouth Drive. The 30 speed limit has been put on from Jeevens Road up until Chester Road, but a lot of parents go up Avery Road, and that junction is extremely dangerous because not only have you got the parents trying to come in and out in their cars, but it's also on a bend, and it really does need a 30-mile limit put before the bend on that road, because even today you hear the squeal of brakes as people are coming out, going in. It's an everyday occurrence. Mm-hmm. It really should be 30 miles an hour. And maybe if they do 36 miles an hour, that would be wonderful, because certainly nobody in this part of the road does 40 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm. I do understand your concern. We've had requests for the whole of Monmouth Drive to be reduced from 40 to 30, right the way from Somerville Road. We targeted this particular funding and this scheme at the section where the school have requested the pedestrian crossing facility. That was seen and deemed to be the priority for this, but there's no reason why in the future it can't be extended over a further area. We've recently done exactly that on Chester Road in Erdington and Pipe Hayes. We were initially reducing the speed limit from Orphanage Road to Pitts Farm Road from 40 to 30, and now we've taken it the whole length, about a mile, right the way to where it's sort of meets at Tyburn House pub by Kingsbury Road. So to spend the particular funding in the time scale for a particular measure requested, and with that budget, we've targeted the area that was most important first.
Rosemary's got her hand up. Do you want to come back, Rosemary?
Along Monmouth Drive, it says it should be 40, but nobody does 40. You have loads of roads coming down into Monmouth Drive, Darnick Road, Carnworth Road, Avery Road, etc. All of those are very difficult, and the same sort of thing with the traffic whizzing by. But the junction of Avery Road, you've got a hell of a lot of parents going to New Oscott School and people trying to walk their children to school around that area and to cross Avery Road so they can get to the school and on their bikes. It's very dangerous. And why on earth school didn't include Avery Road as part of their safer journeys to school, I've no idea. I mean, it's very short-sighted. There's only one end. So it's only the people who are coming from the other side of Chester Road, basically, are being considered.
I think the way to deal with this, Rosemary, I'll ask Carl for his comments, but there is each year we have a sum of money outside of the school's budget for minor measures. And Carl and I and Kath have already had a chat about possibly using some of that to bring some of the road speeds down to 30 on the Chester Road. And obviously we could also look at the possibility of including a further stretch of Monmouth Drive in that
parents are going
as well.
These parents are going to New Oscott School and trying to come out of that road at 3:30 at 8:45. So these are parents of New Oscott School.
Let's have a look at what we might be able to do to support that. I know Carl has his way of, I think you put little traffic speed counters down to get evidence that then can justify funding. So maybe, Carl, that might be a stepping stone to then going a bit further to get some funding.
Yes, I would absolutely see this as a stepping stone. The priority was to focus on where the pedestrian crossing, the future crossing location is to be. It's a refuge for now. It's hopefully a crossing of the future. That was a priority. We know there are a dozen roads linking into Monmouth Drive right the way up to Somerville Road, but we had to focus on this end of the road first as a priority. But these requests, as Councillor Pocock said, some of these come from residents, from meetings, but we then maintain a request list, and every request is captured and they never go away, and the list gets bigger and bigger. We tick a few off each year, but we always go back. We always consider all of the requests.
So I think what we could do, Rosemary, if this is a way forward, is to do as I did with the Station Road request, where people came and made the point as a meeting. It took us a couple of years before that was sorted. But if we can register the point you've made tonight, and on your list, Carl, if you can add that suggestion, it may already be on there, but if we can make sure it is on there, then obviously we can come back to it when we get the chance to look at more money and more schemes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosemary, for bringing it in. I know you're coming back with another point in the community updates when we get to that stage, but I just want to check other comments. Tony's got his hand up. Thanks, Tony, for raising the issue of the drop curbs in Westwood Road, Rainading Road, and I'm pleased to say, thanks to Kath banging the door, that those are now being done. Have you got some more then, Tony?
Yeah, please. Carl, in Holland, don't smile like that.
We saw them coming, don't we?
Never afford your request, Tony.
In Holland, this is a good one. In Holland Street today, a car was parked in a disabled space, and he had a parking ticket on it. Now, that's a rare event. We don't often see that. But the point I wanted to make is this. He's parking there and he's getting a £60 fine, right? Now, as far as I'm concerned, he's not only parking where he shouldn't park, 60 quid fine, but he's also discriminating against deliberately discriminating against the disabled person. Yes. Now, I've been in touch with disabled motorists, and they say that it's not he, the driver, or whoever it is, who's parked there, who's discriminating. It's Birmingham City Council because it's their stretch of road. Now, that's a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Was it yourself, Tony, that reported it last time at the last meeting?
Yes. My point was that you're not only parking in where you shouldn't park, but it's not the same as parking on double yellow lines, because you're deliberately discriminating against a disabled person who wants to park there.
Yes. What I was going to say was, following your request last time, I wrote to the parking enforcement team. I raised this with them and I asked for targeted enforcement, and they sent me a spreadsheet. They went twice a day, every day for 3 weeks. So it just goes to show, when you report these things to us, as Councillor Pocock was saying, the sort of action we can take. If you hadn't reported it and nobody did, then we'd just rely on, you know, random cyclic patrols of all areas. I know this location very well, and I am pleased to hear that they've been issued what's called a penalty charge notice. I believe it's £70, although it's half if you pay within 14 days. So I'm pleased to hear that, you know, they are still patrolling. They weren't able to catch somebody, because it's catching somebody that's a difficult bit, you know.
But what about the other point? The other point is that Birmingham is the discriminating agency, which seems to me pretty ropey, really, when you consider the fact we've only got 70 full-time parking officers in Birmingham. You know, you can't afford to have someone there longer than about, what, 10 minutes twice a day, maybe?
No, I mean, it is difficult. There are around 70 civil enforcement officers, but perhaps 55 of those at work on any typical day because of holiday, courses, leave, whatever, shifts, patterns. They patrol Birmingham city centre, Jury Quarter as priorities. We have Sutton Town Centre, we have the hospitals, we have 500 schools, we have hundreds and hundreds of kilometres of yellow lines, 1 and 2 hour waiting restrictions. When you think what they're up against, you're almost extremely lucky to see one. I do think that they do well under very trying conditions.
So shouldn't the law change then to make the driver the discriminating agent?
Well, the driver certainly is. The driver knows what they are doing. Those bays are well marked both on the road and on the sign. People know exactly what they're doing. And if that motorist went a little bit further down Holland Street, on most days you'll find a space.
Just to follow this up, Tony, and I think this might be helpful to all residents who say to me, we never get to see a traffic warden. It will be good to get the evidence as to how many tickets do get posted in each ward in a course of a year. That brings an income, and I think, Carl, you were explaining to me when I did mention Tony had this interest. This money does go to the council's highways department, I think, or to transportation. Eventually.
Parking enforcement is it's within highways, although it's not my particular sort of area. My job is to get all the restrictions in place, and my colleagues in enforcement, it's their job to enforce them. But my understanding is, and it is more my understanding than actual, is that obviously we have the contract with NSL that has to be paid for. We have managers, people that supervise, people that do the appeals process. You know, there's a whole team behind it. It's not just a person that does a ticket. And I would imagine, I'm not sure for certain, but obviously the money that comes in has to pay for the contract, pay for the staff, the wages, the time, the building, pay for everything. And if there is a surplus, then, you know, where that goes to, I'm not too sure. But the outlay would be considerable.
Okay, well, I think it would be good to get a little briefing on where the money goes. And actually, maybe we could even get a traffic warden to come to one of our forum meetings, and then we can all quiz them as to what they do. That would be a first, but we can always have a go. I think
it would be a first. Probably better if I ask the parking services manager for a briefing.
I think we want the person in. But yes, Carl, it would be great if you
Head on the block here.
for a future meeting, let's store that one. I think that would be quite fun.
Okay.
I'm going to say thanks to Carl for his time. He's always the most loyal officer to attend our ward forum meetings, despite the fact I think you cover 22 wards, is it? About a third of the entire city?
Yes, 23, yes.
Third of 1 million people. But it's always got time for Sutton Vesey, so we'd like to really thank you for that, and for the work you do for us with all the work that the council is carrying out with these various schemes. We'll look forward to seeing you at a future meeting where we can update you, where you can update us on the next stage of your programme. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Always a pleasure. I'm going to just finish then on the item 7, which is community updates. There's one particular community update I'd like to bring in, which is Rosemary again. Rosemary is a member of the Boldmere Futures Partnership, and Boldmere Futures has just gone through a restructure, if that's the right way of putting it, a reorganisation. So, Rosemary, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about the future of Boldmere Futures. You need to put the microphone on, please. Your microphone? You need to put the mic on. Thanks. No, we still can't hear you.
Right, okay.
Yes, got you.
For many years, we've been discussing about being a CIC. This will help between funding, making decisions, a community interest company, rather than this loose group of interested groups within the Boldmere area. It would give a bit more form to the thing. It will also help to get funding. Often people will say for funding to be a part of a CIC, a limited, a trading company, or a charity. And as we were none of these things, sometimes we missed out on money through those areas. We called the executive meeting, and it was thoroughly discussed, pros and cons, etc. about it. The community interest, I'll just read what it says. We had the articles of association, what the membership would be, the directors, the legal responsibilities, etc. We discussed whether there would be problems with tax, but because we would be a non-profit organisation, we wouldn't have to pay any tax for that. And also the fact that we wouldn't have to pay VAT, because unfortunately our turnover would never be that big. After the pros and cons of it, it was decided we would have, after going through the Articles Association, etc., we decided that we would go to apply to become a CIC meeting, and we would call, eventually we will call a full meeting of the whole of the Boldmere Futures Partnership to say about the funds. If they wish to just go straight over into the CIC, because basically we'll be doing exactly the same as what we're doing now, or whether there was any reason they didn't want those funds to go over and they wanted to stay completely separately. And that will be a later date, hopefully sort of in about November, December time, depending on the health issues, etc. And also the part of putting through the papers through to get the CIC passed, etc. We also discussed about the festivals. We've obviously had to cancel 3 festivals. And at the moment, we are intending, fingers crossed, to have a Christmas festival on November the 21st. We're very loosely planning that because we don't want to lay out any money, which we will then lose if it doesn't go ahead. And also, we're putting a lot of work into the Commonwealth Games. We've attended a lot of Zoom meetings about various funding over the things to make it a really fantastic, because really for Boldmere, this is really a once in a lifetime experience. We'd be very grateful when we actually hear from the Commonwealth Games people exactly the route of the things, what's going to be closed, what we can do where and when, so we can make further plans. But we really do want to make the Commonwealth Games celebration a really big thing in Boldmere, to make it family. We want to try and to bring in the Commonwealth, in that we wanted to do music of the Commonwealth, i.e. a bangor band, a steel up band. We thought about Morris dancers. We wondered about maybe some Scottish music dancers, Irish music, and sort of anybody else has any thoughts to give us, we'd be very grateful. We've been looking for, Nigeria does a lot of drumming music, you know, have we got anything from that? So this is what we're meaning to do, to try and bring the Commonwealth to Boldmere on that day and make it fun music. And these are our plans. But again, this would all, the Commonwealth Games should come under the CIC management, and the festival in this November will still be under the Boldmere Futures Partnership, under that umbrella. So that's what we've been up to.
Brilliant. Thanks for the update, Rosemary. And I know Paul Long would have been with us, but he's basking on the beach in Portugal
He's
somewhere.
sunning himself. Hope he gets sunburned.
We're not envious, are we?
No, not at
Anyway,
all.
so thanks for filling in, Rosemary. And it's great news to hear that the financial position of Boldmere Futures should be more solid as a result of this, but that we'll still have the festive activities that we've always enjoyed. So I think that's...
And there's other events. So it means we can have a committee doing this, a committee doing that, the funding going through for something more substantial, etc., without sort of putting the same people trying to spread themselves over so many different things. I think it'd be a much more professional setup and then more beneficial to Boldmere.
That's great. And we're going to have more of these ward forums, of course, so you can update us as we get closer to the Commonwealth Games.
Yes, we get things more in line, but I say we really do want the Commonwealth Games people to actually say this is going to happen, that's going to happen. That's, you know, it's very difficult when you're sort of trying to plan things without actually knowing the parameters that you're working with.
They have to put in a formal application to get an approval. So I think that's very close. I'm talking a matter of days or weeks in order to get it all sorted. So hopefully by the time we get to June or July, the mystery will be solved and we'll know exactly what's being proposed.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Right, moving swiftly on. Manish Puri is with us, our town councillor, additional town councillor for the Sutton Vesey ward. I thought, Manish, it would be great if you could give us a bit of an update on what's going on in the town council. And I know Becky's also with us as the secretary of the Friends of the Gates of Boldmere and Bannersgate. And hopefully you can give us a bit of an update on that one, Becky, after Manish has spoken, including what's happening on the car parking plans. So, Manish, do you want to kick off with a quick summary of what's been going on at your end on the town council?
Sure. So the Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council met last week for our AGM and also the annual electors meeting. And most excitingly, it's probably our first in-person meeting since I think last February. So it's conducted fully masked up and with full social distancing in effect. Again, I'll do like a whistle-stop tour of the topics covered. If you want more detail, I think Nick Horner's done quite a comprehensive piece in My Sutton Coldfield on the Birmingham Mail website. So let's run through the main things. Firstly, we have a new town mayor. Councillor Jane Mossam roughly handed over the reins to Councillor Terry Wood, Councillor for Warmley and Minworth. And the new deputy mayor is our very own Vesey councillor, Jan Cairns. I'm afraid she's not here to rattle her regalia for us. Continuing on the personnel front, we're also pleased to welcome Kath Scott as the new town councillor for Vesey. I'm sure can only add to the great job she's been doing as a town councillor. Also, in place of the mayor's challenge, because obviously the pandemic logistically meant they couldn't really have a mayor's challenge, the town council contributed funding towards primary schools to get laptops, headsets, webcams to enable some more remote teaching while the schools were closed. The town council also put together the Sutton Together partnership as a volunteering initiative, initially set to provide assistance in the early days of the pandemic, and then has continued with supporting the vaccine program at the town hall. I don't know where most of you had your vaccines, but I've had my one at the town hall.
Yeah, me too.
And that's been supported largely by volunteers.
Both of them.
I think I'm due mine tomorrow or the day after. Also, following along, just to go on quite quickly, Birmingham City Council have formally adopted the Sutton Coldfield Town Centre Regeneration Master Plan as a supplementary planning document. In the interim, there has been investment in new street furniture, seating bins, lights. There is some discussion about subsidising free parking for shoppers. That's in the early stages. I'm not sure how I feel about that. May work, may not, but we shall see. Also, Town Council have created a What's On website with the Sutton Coldfield bid to try and sort of advertise what's going on sort of socially, culturally in Sutton Coldfield. And there's also been an investment in the cycle hire scheme. I think we were in the pilot areas to launch that scheme, and there are plans to expand that further, I think, sometime in the future. Moving on to the grants. So I think 236,000 has been issued in grants to 27 groups and organisations, including about 40,000 to groups helping to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. One service, I don't know if Rob's got pictures, but is a new Town Ranger service, which was launched, I think, in February. And between February and April, I think 100 sites have been cleaned up. So essentially, if people spot an area that's a bit grotty and needs clearing up, it's overgrown, weeding, if we let them know, they can turn up and sort that out. A local resident did point out a couple of sites around Jockey Road. And within 4 weeks, sure enough, the rangers had turned up and done their magic. So if anyone's aware of any areas or any little alleyways or streets that could do with tidying up, if you let either your councillors know or the council know directly, we can put them on the list to be attended. From my point of view, obviously take a lot of interest in the town centre regeneration plans. And again, although they are proceeding, I think there's still a sense that they're looking to protect what we've got. I think a lot of the groups involved on the regeneration partnership are the groups who've traditionally been involved in town centre. And I think it still needs to open up, because obviously the future of the town centre isn't going to be similar to the past or a variation on it. I think it's going to be quite a big change. I mean, I think we're looking at more of a cultural offering. I think the public sector has a lot more to offer. I mean, Birmingham City Council own the Red Rose complex. I think those kind of things are going to make a difference. Whereas I think obviously the people in the group are the bid, the traders, the property owners, who've got a kind of vested interest in almost of making what's already there work better. So I think maybe the conversation needs to be opened up a little bit further. I know following the minutes, the sort of folio sort of tried to sort of get a wider input on there, but certainly that's going to be my sort of premise. I mean, certainly the town council seems to have a very small voice in terms of regular input or reports from the regeneration partnership. So I think we need to push for a bigger voice. Otherwise, in the case of a direction may be chosen which isn't necessarily the right direction, it's always hard to turn things around. That's me.
That's great stuff, Manish. I must try and get hold of the same quality of IT microphone and earphone kit that you've got. I think he's got a professional one there. It's better than mine. Also, thank you for the work you got sorted on that little passageway down from Kyneton Road onto Chester Road. It's always been a troublesome passage, so I went to have a look at it the other day. It's looking cracking, clean, smart, just what we want. So thanks for picking it up.
So if anyone knows of any other areas that could do with a bit of TLC, if you let us know. And
Manish is a great guy on Twitter, so if you want to tweet a problem, he'll pick it up. So that's obviously how that other one worked. Right, I'm conscious that we're really close to the time when we should finish the meeting, but I did want Becky Clark, to come in to update us on the Friends of the Gates. And I think, if I'm right, Becky, the car parking plans for the Boldmere Gate, which have been controversial, shall we say, I think the City Council are now about to proceed to implement that scheme. Am I right? You can fill us in on the details.
So there was a lot of interest in the proposals for the new car park at Boltmere Gate at Sutton Park, and the vast majority of representations were in support, and obviously with the petition as well. So the town council raised an objection to the scheme. However, based on the comments from the community, the brilliant work done by many individuals and groups who made representations to the planning committee by letter and the petition, the council has recommended approval for the proposed improvements to the car parks. They'll include an area of restoration of the triple SI as well, improved drainage, a much better surface, and a much better environment for car users and pedestrians with the new route. The planning committee date where the application will formally be determined is this week. It's on the 27th of May. So there should be a decision notice issued the next day, which will be available to view on the planning portal. But it's very unlikely the application would be refused contrary to a planning officer's recommendation. And like many of us in the community will have reviewed the policy and looked at the benefits and opportunities that it will offer to not just local residents, but to people who visit to the park. And the additional parking spaces provided may help to prevent some of that antisocial behaviour that we see from car parking over drop curves to neighbouring roads during the bank holidays and peak seasons for visitors who travel there. And in terms of the Friends of the Gate, the car park's really the first stage in setting out the next stages of our consultation with the community about what facilities should be improved at the gates. Obviously, Banners Gate also could do with an improvement to the car park. It already has a toilet and little kiosk. That's something that we'd very like to see at Boltmere Gate, and also opportunities for more play, more signage, more bins and more facilities. But again, the car park's the first stage of that, because by monitoring the use of the car park, we can easily illustrate the need, and there'll be a great opportunity for us to engage with people who are using the car park about the facilities that they would like to see at both Boltmere and Banners Gate. So really, really pleased. And as I say, I know Boltmere Neighbourhood Forum made a representation like ourselves, highlighting the benefits that this scheme will offer. It's been really difficult for us over the last year to do engagement because of social distancing. But as we move to a time of comparative safety, with many of us being vaccinated, I had my first vaccine in April. So super, yeah, they finally got down the list to my age group. So that's good. More of our community are protected from the virus, and we can again start thinking about coming together, doing consultation, and having meetings in public and inviting more people along. We do have a Zoom call every month or so. If anyone's interested, please let either myself or one of the ward councillors know, and we'll make sure the invite to the next meeting shared with you. If you want to find out more about our group, I can put my contact details in the chat, and we'd be delighted to have more members. We're also considering putting together a bid for the Commonwealth Games funding, but we'd really like to work with other community groups to see how we can organise our event to be complementary to others and operate perhaps over the same sort of weekend. So you get a clustering effect of events. So everyone's not drawn to one location at the same time. So there's a bit of movement around Boltmere Gate, Banners Gate, as well as Boltmere High Street as well, to try and help that community engagement and involvement. Again, we know that a good bid is based on community consultation. So hopefully the last weekend in June, hopefully you'll see me at the Gates Timber Park or on Boltmere High Street asking what sort of events do you feel would bring the community together and celebrate the Commonwealth. And I know that this is really very much forward planning because it's in the distance, but we also have the Queen's Jubilee coming up next year. The Platinum Jubilee, who would believe it? So again, it'd be nice to see if there's an opportunity and an appetite from the community to work with us to organise some sort of event at the gates to celebrate that as well, perhaps a mass picnic of celebration.
That's a nice way to finish a mass picnic. I think I could bring along a few items for that one. We'll look forward to that, Becky. And thanks again for your enthusiasm, an unbeatable level of enthusiasm as always from Becky Clark. And thanks again for all the work you've done, banging away about the car park, hopefully now successful. Thanks also to Manish for the petition. I think over 500 people have signed that. There's apparently a formula, Becky, where you can work out somebody's age from when they got vaccinated. I don't know what it is, so I can't find out what your age is, but it's apparently a way to get the secrets broadcast. You don't need to tell us.
It's okay. I'm 42 in less than a month.
Oh well, I won't go any further, but I did find out that Manish and Kath are the same age. So there you go. Well, I won't tell you how. Right, we're moving swiftly on to the closure of this meeting. Does anyone else wish to add anything else to this meeting? Any comments, any questions, any updates, any information? I'm looking at the chat and there's nothing in it. I'm looking at the hands up and there aren't any. So it just remains for me then to thank everybody for attending. We had a great attendance tonight, buzzing with activities as always in the Sutton Vesey ward. We look forward to meeting again. I guess it will be about 2 months' time, probably the 3rd week of July, before we all beaver off to those summer holidays. Even if, like me, I'm going overseas, but that's to the Isle of Wight. I don't think there is a ban on that yet, so I'm hoping to land there sometime in August. But thanks again to everybody. Thanks to officers for turning up, members of the public for sitting and working with us, and obviously the presenters for their contributions. So thanks again for tonight, and we'll see you all on the next occasion. Cheers for now.
Bye.